Well, hello and welcome to Creativity Conversations. I think this is episode 10, and I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with Kristy Halvorsen today. Creativity Conversations, if you're new to the call, is where I get to have the pleasure of talking to people who live creative lives because they understand the nature of creativity, they embody it, and they share that understanding with others. So, Kristy, I'm going to read your bio. Kristy is a nomadic world traveler, and you'll get to hear what that means. Transformative coach, writer, and speaker. In 2017, Kristy sold almost all her stuff. I wonder what she didn't sell, and set out to explore the wider world. Through a deeper understanding of how our mind works and actually diving in and living what she coaches, life became surreal, work became effortless, and the unimaginable became commonplace. Kristy's on a mission to reintroduce the world to the ease and success found when we stop trying to predict our future and instead are open to the infinite possibilities available to us at any moment. Her word to describe this simple, fun, and beautiful way to live is to cottywomple, that is, to live by instinct, open to limitless possibilities, and to enjoy life along the way. And to find out more about Kristy, go to yourrevolution.com. Welcome, Kristy. Finally, I get to have you with us.
Well, thank you. This is fun. And it was interesting hearing that bio. I haven't read or heard that in a long time. And I'm like, wow. It's interesting hearing something you wrote a long time ago and what has changed. Speaking of creativity, like what's changed since even that place. But yeah, thank you.
Can you say what some of the changes have been?
Well, I guess because some people don't know what a nomadic world traveler is and stuff, I can just really give a really brief and just like name a few things that I didn't sell.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I lived a pretty normal life until the end of 2017, and I had this wild and crazy dream to live in an Airstream trailer and travel. And in 2015, I made a 5.5-year plan to hopefully be doing that by the end of 2020, and life kind of took me. It was like took me by the reins, like almost lassoed me and drug me out into the world much sooner than I'd ever imagined. And it happened after I kind of realized that I wasn't in control, and there's a different way of doing things instead of planning everything out day by day and kind of living more by the seat of my pants. And so, yeah, by the end of 2017, well, actually it was November of 17, I sold my house. I had a 3-bedroom house that I lived in for 12 years. I sold my house, and I thought I was a minimalist until I started trying to get rid of everything, and I realized I wasn't. And so yeah, I sold almost everything. I kept my Airstream trailer, my truck to pull it with, and some things that fit inside both of those. And other than that, I left a couple of Rubbermaid tubs at my mom's house with some keepsakes. But other than that, like, I live mobily, and I pretty much have everything I own with me at all times. So I kind of live like a turtle. And
except you go much faster.
Sometimes I honestly wonder if a turtle could have beat me across the US, because when I left Florida, like my journey into the unknown, like selling my house, started in November of 17. And January 1st of 18, I left Florida. I left Tallahassee, Florida, and went west. And I didn't make it to California until April 14th. So I think a turtle actually could have beat me. But yeah, that's just a little tiny summary of what it means to be a nomadic world traveler. And in the meantime, I often park my trailer and travel all around the world, but I haven't been doing that lately, of course. So the rest of 2020, I'll be in the US definitely. But yeah, so that's it. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk about how letting go of what we know and kind of living from that special place of wonder relates to creativity. So yeah. I don't know. I'm ready for you to ask me some really cool stuff.
Well, now you're putting the pressure on me. Let's see. Well, first of all, I just want to take a little exception to what you said about living a pretty normal life, because you tried your hand at a lot of different things, right?
Oh yeah.
Can you
Yeah, I
just
guess I
say a
did.
little bit about that? Because I think that also speaks to an innate sense that you already had, which you've certainly explored and expanded upon so beautifully. So talk a
Yeah,
little bit about that, if you would.
sure. So what Nina's referring to is I've had 3 careers in my life, and I had many small careers before that, like as a young adult before I actually, went to university. But when I got to school, I went to school mainly because I got a basketball scholarship. I mean, I knew I was going to go to university, but I didn't have any plans beyond playing basketball and getting some type of degree. And I took a bunch of tests when they threatened to kick me out of school if I didn't choose a major. And it said I should be an engineer, a forester, or an auto mechanic. And they didn't have degrees in 2 of those. So I said, well, I guess I'm an engineer. And so I ended up going to school for engineering. I got my master's in mechanical engineering, and then promptly fell in love with firefighting. And so I worked 2 jobs as an engineer. The second one was only because my mom begged me to give engineering another 6 months. And 6 months to the day, I left engineering and went into firefighting full time. And I often tell people that was the biggest and best decision of my life to go. I was 24 years old, and I left a very young career, a very new career as an engineer. And I was supposedly pretty good at it, but my heart wasn't in it. And I was a volunteer firefighter, and I would go every night to the firehouse and work for free, and couldn't wait to do it. And then I'd go back to get paid really well as a young kid, and watch the clock all day to get out of there. And I realized, what am I doing? And no one in my life thought it was a good idea. No one. They all thought I was nuts because I took a massive, like more than a half pay cut. Went to a career that you need a high school education, and it's really dangerous. And it just didn't make sense to anyone, but something inside me said go. And so against everyone's advice, I left engineering and went to be a firefighter. And when I did that, it was pure, something in my heart said to do it. I called it following my heart. And it worked out tremendously well. And so it was really cool because at 24 years old, that decision helped me see it wasn't really a decision at all. Like I knew I was going to do that. I didn't have to decide. And I could follow my heart, and it worked out marvelously. And so from then on, I was always people thought of me as a bit, I don't know the word, awkward or flighty. Like I just did things that did not make sense to most people. And it was because of the quote lesson I learned at 24, that you can follow your heart and things do work out, even if it doesn't make any sense at all.
And didn't you end up running that firehouse?
No, there's a rumor about that. I was a lieutenant, so I was a station officer. So I worked for a city that had 5 stations, and I was the lieutenant, which means I was in charge of one of the fire stations. So 1/5 of the city every 3rd day, I was in charge of, the welfare of the humans and the property in that area. So I didn't run the whole fire department or anything, but I was a station officer. So it was fun. I got to, sit in the passenger seat of the fire truck, make all the decisions at the calls, and train and kind of coach people along in the fire service for my I was an officer for the last 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you think all of that experience equipped you, if you don't mind the pun, equipped you well to Cottywomple?
For sure. I say with firefighting, especially, one, you learn to be just really open to not knowing what the heck you're doing, but figuring it out. And so you think about calls that firefighters go on, and literally we went on everything, you name it. You name an emergency and we did it. So we would get calls sometimes and be like, oh my gosh, like, what do we do with this? But you got to show up and actually do something. But you would show up on scene a lot of times, and it could be having to, pry somebody out of a car on the interstate, or you name it, just really crazy calls. And you show up and you don't know what the heck to do. You've never seen, all the training you do, you get to calls and you've never seen this before. And you have a team there, and you just know, hey, we're going to start working and eventually we'll figure this out. Like you don't show up on the call and say, "Ooh, guys, I don't know. Let's call someone else." You know, you just figure it out. And so it's cool because you learn to be like pseudo MacGyver-ish. You know, if people are old enough and know about the show MacGyver, like the guy could do anything with, you know, a pen and a toothpick. And so as a firefighter, you really learn to do that. And as an engineer, it was the same thing, you know, in a different way. But yeah, it really, speaking of creativity, like the job of being a firefighter paramedic is ultimate creativity. Like that's all it is. So yeah, it kind of did start laying a cool foundation for really feeling comfortable with taking off on my own and traveling.
That's amazing. So I think that's probably enough, if unless you feel there's more about your backstory.
No,
But
that's good.
what I'd love to do is explore with you the nature of creativity and letting go, because there's a clear connection in my mind, and I see it in how you live your life. Share some of that.
Well, I mean, this is a work in progress too. But so if you ask me 6 months from now, it might be different. But yeah, there's something huge about letting go. And letting go is probably much bigger than I even realize, like what that really means. So letting go of what we think should happen, or sometimes even what we want, or how we know things that, you know, you hear people all this time say, "Oh, that's how we've always done it." Like letting go of that, letting go of who you think you are and what you think you're good and bad at and what you like. Letting go of being in control, the illusion of being in control. Like I love the fact that we've all been plunged into uncertainty, you know, in the last 6 months, because we were always plunged in uncertainty. We were always living in the middle of uncertainty. And it was an illusion that we weren't. It was an illusion that we knew what was, you know, like people say, where do you think you'll be a year from now? Like it's an illusion that we thought we knew that. And it's letting go of all of that and really, really, really being okay with not knowing and being open to life and the flow of life. Yeah. And I think that is, creativity is there. Like creativity is always there. It's like the fertile ground that's always there. And when we can let go in that way, like the sprouts just, you know, they're gonna come anyways, but it seems like they might come a bit simpler, easier, and maybe grow a little taller.
So if someone heard you on this call and said, wow, I'd really like to do that, live that way, but I'm afraid to, how would you respond to them?
Yeah. Well, first I'd want to clarify, you don't have to travel to live this way, but you could just let go. You could stay right where you're at and cottywomple and let go, right? So number one, I would clarify that. And sorry, can you ask your question again? Because now I forgot it. Speaking of being in the moment.
That's right. So in the moment, just forgot what happened before. Well, let's go sideways and then maybe we'll come back to this point again.
Okay.
Talk about cottywampling, what it means and how you see it working out, even if you're staying in the same place and not traveling around the world.
Yeah. So cottywampling is just a really cool word that nobody knows what it means. So it's fun because we get to make it up. And the reason being is because there's a lot of other cliche words you could use to describe cottywampling, but we all think we know what they mean. So you get an idea in your head. But cottywampling is truly being in the moment, being open to anything. And I mean, that's pretty much it. Like the slogan, I have like 3 definitions of cottywampling, and one is unpredicting your journey. So it's not knowing where you're going. And then another definition is to travel purposely towards an unknown destination. So it's all about the unknown and being open and present. And yeah, like we can all do that from anywhere. I mean, you could be sick in a hospital bed and still be in that space, because it's not a physical location. It's more of a way of being. And what's cool is you go look at kids, like little kids, like the little ones, and how they live. Like they're coddywampling the heck out of life at all times. They don't know any different. They haven't been taught. Like even look at a little kid that's learning how to walk, you know, coddywampling, learning how to talk, learning anything and playing, and the emotions a kid can go through in a 5-minute period. And so what's cool is we've all done it before. We've all know how to do it. We know how to live like this because we've all been there. And it's going back to what we already know, how we lived before we were taught to live a different way. And the creativity, like think about the creativity of a kid. You know, like they have no idea whether they're good at art or music or singing or dancing or writing or poetry. They just create because they don't know they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one definition I heard of coddywampling was to travel confidently towards an unknown destination. So to me, what you're saying reminds me of how when you don't know that you can't or you shouldn't, there's no reason to be afraid or to be anything other than confident, because why not?
Right. Yeah. And I didn't touch on the afraid part. Yeah. Because I kind of forget about being afraid nowadays. Like it happens because I'm human, but it's just so rare. And it's not like I'm out gallivanting and, you know, cliff diving or anything like that. I mean, I probably would if I knew how, but it's not like I'm not being safe. But it's almost like there's a place where you can be like, well, what are you afraid of? Like, what is there truly to be afraid of? And I think it seems that comes from really knowing like who we are, what we're made of, what life's about. So
talk about that part.
Oh dear.
Any of it like whatever comes out.
It's a story. I know I've told it. I don't remember. Maybe it was my Codywample group I told it in. But there's a story about me in Oregon last summer. Like, I fell in love with Oregon. I was on my way to Canada, and I actually went to Canada and said, what am I doing? And I went back to Oregon. I spent almost the whole summer in Oregon, in Central Oregon. And there was a point where I wanted to go and see the sunset on this big butte, is what they call it. I don't even know if I'm saying it right because I'm from Florida and we don't have those. But they're like it's an extra large hill. It's almost like a zit, like it's all flat and there's this like big hill. So that's a butte. So I wanted to go through this forest from where I was to this butte. And I knew the direction of the butte. And once I got a few miles into the forest, I could actually see it. So there was no trail. I was just heading to this butte. I wanted to see the sunset. And sometimes when I Codywample, I don't think about like the sun's going to set and I'm on this butte and I got to get back. Like I didn't consider that. Next time I will. But I had to get back off the butte and through the woods and back to where I was staying in the pitch black dark. And I was pretty confident I could find my way back. But it took much longer than I thought. And I got what would most people call lost.
But not you.
I found myself out in the woods. And I knew, like, I'm thinking, if I keep heading this direction, I'll hit a fence line. And if I follow that fence line, maybe a mile, I'll get to the corner where I know the gate is that will lead to my trailer. That was in my head. Well, I found the fence and there's a big pile of rocks and boulders and I couldn't follow it. So I kept going back out into the woods and heading in a general direction where I thought the fence was, the gate was, where I could get back to my trailer. And I never once had a question in my mind that I wouldn't get there, but I didn't really know how. And what was interesting is as I was heading to the butte in the daylight, I saw these two animals, which looked like they were either wolves or the most beautiful beautiful coyotes I've ever seen in my life. But they were out there with me. And I remember seeing them like, oh my gosh, so beautiful. And as I'm in the dark, fumbling around in the woods by myself, I'm thinking, oh, those guys are still out here, along with wild cats and mountain lions, I don't know, bears. But I wasn't scared. And that was what shocked me, is I wasn't scared at all. And I remember the beautiful silence and the stars. I remember how bright the stars were and how beautiful the silence was. And I was kind of contemplating like, wow, like, what if an animal did jump out and try to find me in the woods? Like, what would I do? And I'm thinking, I don't know, but I probably will know if it happens. And I noticed I was so present that I could hear things way off in the distance. And I'm thinking I would hear them coming, and I don't know what I'd do. I don't know if I'd hold my bike. I was with my bike. I don't know if I'll hold my bike, or I don't know what I'll do, but let me just trust I'll know then. And it was this beautiful peacefulness. And I actually did eventually make it out of the woods and back to my trailer. And my friends who I was staying in their yard, and I had texted them at some point and said, listen, I don't know where I'm at, but I know I'll make it home, but I think I should probably tell you that I'm out here. So he knew I was out in the woods. And the next morning, he was like, what are you thinking? You know, because he said that. He's like, there's wild cats and bears. And I was, you know, I probably wouldn't do that like every day, but it was a really cool experience because that was one of the first times I realized I wasn't afraid. And I loved the presence and clarity that came from not being afraid. And it was something to do with, like, this might sound morbid, but just knowing that, like, if it was my time, it would be my time. And in that case, my body would be eaten by an animal or something, and I would still be okay, if that makes sense. So that was a long story to kind of say, like, that evening, I really saw that I had a different understanding of who I am and what it means to live and to experience life as a human being. Yeah. And there was just pure presence there. And not saying I'm in that space all the time, but in that space, like, wow, there's so much is possible, and it's so peaceful. And yeah, hopefully I would have gotten really creative if an animal would have jumped out at me.
But it didn't.
Was that a long enough ramble to answer your question?
Yeah. The first thing I picked up on with what you were sharing was how present you became.
Yeah.
And the contrast between being present when you don't have an agenda, you don't have a script, you don't have an expectation of how it would be, how it's supposed to be, that when you're in that space, that is when life comes alive, and we come alive to life.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I can see myself in the past being so freaked out, it would have been a terribly unenjoyable experience. Like, I literally was in awe of the beauty. I was in the woods, and there was like no moon, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the stars, and just, I knew I would find my way. And it was almost like I was enjoying the journey. It was almost like when I found that gate, I was like, oh, that was too fast. I was having fun, you know, but it was that presence that was so beautiful, that allows you to see the beauty in something that when you weren't present and were in your head, you might have missed all of that.
Why not live that way, right?
Yeah.
So you coach people on the nature of cattywampling as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I say it like that because it's like, you know, it's almost like, I don't know if I coach people or just explore with them and help them see more clear what's possible. Yeah. You know, like I have, like, one of my favorite things is my group. And it was funny because the end of the last group, one of the people said, this is the first group I've ever been in. It's so cool. We don't have a facilitator. Because it's like, we're just a group of explorers together. We happen to meet on my Zoom. And that's a perfect example of, like, even how maybe in one-on-one coaching, it's a little more directive, but I try not to be. Like, I try just to be so open and be be an explorer. Like my Facebook page, there's a picture of a bench. Banner, I guess. Actually, let me go because I'm horrible at remembering. So I want to read it to you guys because it's kind of like that's how I want to live and coach by. So the bench in the picture says, "Don't walk in front of me. Don't walk behind me. Walk beside me and just be my friend." And that's how, believe me, people, especially people that know me well, like family members, are like, she's not all enlightened. In fact, she loses it and she's, because I'm a human. But like that bench, that's why it's been my profile picture for probably 2 years, or banner for probably 2 years now. Because the moment I saw that bench, I was like, that's it. Like, that's not only how I want to live, that's how I want to like explore with people, guide anyone that's open. Like that's how I want to be as a coach. Yeah.
So beautiful. It reminds me of that quote by Ram Dass, who said, "We're all just walking each other home."
Yeah.
And we all see different angles of what's in front of us.
Yeah.
And you see something I don't see. I might see something you see, but it's very, not to get political, but it's very democratic in that way. We all have it. We all have this wisdom. We all have this creative nature. Sometimes it's obscured for me and you can point it out. Might be a time when it's not obscure for me and I can share it with you.
Yes. Yes. No, it's exactly. And that's why it's like, to me, Kadiwampling isn't something to teach anyone. Like I said, we all already done it. There's not one person on the planet that isn't a Kadiwampler. Like, just so you guys all know, everybody here, everybody's listening, you're a Kadiwampler. You're a Kadiwampler from way back. And so Kadiwampling is honestly, it's like the most beautiful, pure exploration there ever is. So it's bringing people back to realizing they are all Kadiwamplers. And then the act of Kadiwampling is just being open, present, and exploring.
Which can be done in your Airstream, at your desk, in your kitchen, wherever you are.
And the paint on the canvases behind you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering, like, what do you, because you've kind of heard about Kadiwampling enough. Like, what's your take on Kadiwampling and creativity?
I think that's the ground for exploring anything. You know, what I've seen over and over again when I do artwork is that if I go in with expectations, if I go in with some idea of what I think is going to happen, it ruins the experience of it.
Yeah.
So the way my own painting has evolved is that I create the papers, I paint the papers first, and then I'm on a blank paper and I say, okay, what wants to show up here? What wants to go together? What wants to dance? What wants to play here? And as soon as I started, I had really good advice from one of my earlier teachers who said, if you're taking more than 3 seconds to make a decision, you got to stop right there and go on to the next thing, because your head will start really saying, well, is this the right idea? Should I be doing that? Or does this look good? It never helps. It just gets in the way. So I love what you're saying about just coming from your heart and just following that flow, because to me, that's the best way to live.
Yeah.
Whether I'm painting or talking to someone, or doesn't matter what, it's just a place of openness and appreciation and noticing and gratitude. And isn't this great kind of a feeling?
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's open the call up to anybody who has a question or a comment. And if not, you and I will just keep yakking.
Okay.
Right. So everybody probably knows to raise their little, I'm going to make a blue digital hand here. And someday I'll have it. But Nikon's already ahead of me. So Nikon, over to you.
Hey, Kristy.
Hello.
You're one of my favorite mentors in the whole thing. So first of all, I want to thank you for ruining my life, because since getting to know you and Kariwampo, like once you see it, you can't not see it. And every time I kind of feel like my ambition, like, okay, and I'm like, yeah, you're doing that thing. And Chris, and I'm like, just the seeing was beautiful. So I had this big realization that I'd love for you to speak to. I realized that I was really operating from I was talking to Martin Bauer about this too, about this premise I had about my work. And I wrote about it too. I realized like, oh, Nikon thinks the 3 Ps are about helping people experience better things and less of the bad things. And in kind of what you were saying, I realized how, yeah, but that's not living. Like it needs to be all of it and be less afraid of the bad things too. So I've been going on Toku, who's another coach. He goes on these things called date nights, where he just goes on a date and does nothing. He just waits for nothing. But he brings flowers and like he just waits in a car, and he writes, and I was like, I waited in the car, I got bored, I fell asleep, but I'm awake. So I did that. And all these thoughts that I've been constantly like, it's just your thinking, it's just like they all came to the forefront. And I was like, so I took a deep breath and I was like, okay, let's just not, it's just your thinking. Let's see what happens. Like, and then like 5 minutes of like crying, I'm so lonely, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, but what messed me up was how satisfying it was, Kristy. How satisfying the loneliness and the pain and the sorrow was. And I was like, wow, I would never want to take this away from anybody. And like I wrote about it, I realized like, if you came here only to be happy without experiencing pain that puts you on your knees, like that's a ripoff. Like you don't get the good, like, you know what I mean? So I'd love for you to speak to that too, because I think people rarely speak about that. Because I think in this space, it's mostly, it feels like we're always talking about how to be happier and how to blah, blah, blah. But nobody talks about the juicy stuff that comes from just sitting in not nice thinking.
Yeah. It's the judgment.
Yeah.
Like even that, like it's not nice thinking. Well, I totally get what you're saying. Because there's sometimes you're just like, that's not nice thinking. But it's so like experiencing, it was funny because I was just in a conversation with a group yesterday about this, about experiencing emotions without judgment, like experiencing anything without judgment. Yeah. And it came up, it was actually Dickon that said this. He said, he compared it to sports. He goes, anger without judgment can be so freeing, like you can be so like driven in a good way. And I can relate because I played college basketball, and it was funny. And in high school, my coach told me, my basketball coach said, you play awesome when you're pissed off. like that's the trick. If I can get you pissed off, you're going to have the game of your life. But the thing is I don't think I would be pissed off at anything. Like I wasn't judging. I would just get pissed off, and then I would just go into this zone. And that's what Dickon was describing. Like anger without judgment is that. And you don't have to be in sport, but it's just a good example. And then like I could see how like grief or sadness without judgment can be so beautiful. Like I've experienced, that was one of my first times I experienced pure emotion without judgment, was feeling really sad. And it was so beautiful. And what was interesting was I think I was crying with sadness for maybe a minute, but I suddenly wasn't. I didn't even know what happened. It was like a baby. You see a baby that's been crying and they're giggling with a wet face. Like that happened to me as an adult. And it was the first time I just let myself be sad and didn't judge anything. I was like, oh, I'm going to go with this. And so but you can take that out into anything. Like, again, that's what's so cool about Kariwampling, whatever that is it applies to everything. So we're talking about emotions, but what if we lived life without judgment? And believe me, I'm guilty of judgment, 100%. I'm not saying I don't, but I can just see how, whether it's with people or situations or emotions or anything, when we are without judgment, like we come from that pure place. And so what you're asking about is emotions. Like most people don't think it was all rainbows and butterflies. Like I sold my house, I drove off into the sunset, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, it wasn't. It was awful. It was horrible. I can tell you, I made it to Texas, and nothing against anybody from Texas. It just happened to be where I was. But I was like, this sucks. Like, I want my old house back. I want my old job back. I want, like, it was back, it was in 2017 when the commercials about the Staples easy button was like all the rage. And I was like, give me the freaking easy button. And I want to rewind. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I was so lonely. I remember trying to be all hard and tough, but just like crying. Like, I remember one of my friends called and I was just like, I mean, I reached out to, I was in Supercoach during this ugly, horrible, really lonely period. Nothing against Supercoach Academy, but it just happened to me what I was doing in the midst of this. And I remember reaching out to my mentor coach, like, I don't care about Supercoach Academy. Can you help me? Like, I just want somebody, I need help with this feeling. And I was so lost and lonely because it was almost like I imagined this fairy tale that would happen when I left everything and rode off into the sunset. And it didn't feel that way. But what you were saying about living through that, it was a gift. That was the part of my life where I saw that I went on a walkabout like the Aboriginals do. Yeah. And I had to go through that. And I can say, I can't ever imagine feeling lonely like that ever again the rest of my life. But I saw such deep stuff about life during that period, which opened my eyes to so much more than not being lonely.
I think that's why I love you so much, because I think, like, intuitively I get that you get it. Like that, like, you've been there. You know what I mean? Like you've been there and I've been there. It's like, oh yeah, she gets it without saying it. And I think that's so cool. I think that's the gift. It allows you to really deeply connect with everybody who's also been there, instead of just like talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. We've all been there.
And we've all been not that we've all been Texas crying to our friends, but we've all been in that place. But we've also all been in the really beautiful, lovely place where we've experienced an emotion that we might have previously judged as wrong, but somehow it was beautiful. And even if it's only happened this much, we've all experienced that. But that's available to us all the time. Like when we live without judgment, like fear. Like, what if we could be afraid without judging ourselves or the fear or whatever we're afraid of? Like, what if we could be totally cool with just letting that fear bubble up in us and just being like, yeah, but not judging the fear, not judging myself, not judging anything, but just living in it, being present with it, Yeah.
So cool. Thank you, Kristy.
Sure.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to Mr. Stein.
Mr. Stein. There he is.
I'm just loving this, Kristy, and I love your stories. And I was glad to hear finally the official version of the firehouse story. I thought you were running one firehouse. I didn't know you were a lieutenant and making all the decisions and sitting in the command seat and all that. And I'm not surprised, because I could easily imagine you doing it. But it's a very impressive story,
Yeah.
And I was thinking, as you were talking about coddywampling, that it's really just sort of giving yourself permission to make it up as you go along.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was something you were just saying about judgment, and it really took me somewhere, because it made me realize I'm doing more of that lately, experiencing something that might not be pleasant or something that I might not be proud of without judgment. And it just makes it so goddamn much easier. And it's the judgment, I think, that just locks it in place and makes it seem like it won't go away and seem like a horribly, unbearably heavy load. And without that, it's just something that's happening and then it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
True. I have a question for you, but I've forgotten. You were saying so many things that were just wonderful. I lost it, so sorry.
Oh, no worries. Like, I don't know. Do you have anything else? Because I love hearing you talk too.
Not right now.
So you can always come back on again.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yes, to what Gary said. Beautiful.
Yeah. Byron Katie has a book called Loving What Is. And she
Yes.
talks about being at war with reality, which is where most of our thinking takes us. When we don't want it this way, or we think it should go another way, or we've got some kind of objection to what it is, and our thinking is just putting up the roadblocks one in front of another and another. And it's when we are able to realize that it's not reality that's the problem, but it's how we're looking at reality, then we have a different possibility to live the way that you're talking about.
Yeah. You know, I love that. You know, what's funny is I don't know anything about Byron Katie. Like beyond, I know a cockroach crawled on her or something. Somebody told me that, and like she had an enlightenment experience. Like I know that much, but other than that, I don't really know much about her. But it was last summer again in Oregon. I really saw like what you're speaking to about what is. And I wrote a blog about what is, and I made a video, and it's like, you know, like I thought like there was this new cool thing, and somebody wrote me an email and says, Byron Katie wrote a whole book about this. You know, like, have you read it? I'm like, no, but no, it's fun, but it's cool. Like, I love when that happens because it's almost like, okay, there's truth because someone, and probably many someones, I'm probably a slow learner that saw that later on, but there's many people that have seen that. And it's like, how can we all see the same thing if it wasn't true? But there's such beautiful in letting go. That's the letting, when we started this call with letting go. Like, I don't know if you saw me, I get all fired up because this what is thing is like one of my favorite topics in the whole world. Because when we can let go to that degree and just be like, oh, well, I guess that's what we're doing. Like, I guess what's happening. Like when we can see that that's what is, and it can be beautifulness. It can be not the one I'm judging, but it can be things that seem horrible. It can be death and destruction and loss, and it can be the most beautiful day of your life, and it can be anything in between. But the more we can see that that's what is, and that's what always was and is, like we can still be sad, and we can still be angry, and we can still be full of joy and love and all that. It changes something when we just know that that's what is. And there's, you know, like a perfect example is today I was supposed to be leaving the beach in Connecticut and driving to Boston to stay on a river outside of Boston. And I was like, it's funny because I was just telling my mom that the other day, it was like, I said it jokingly. I'm like, yeah, I'm supposed to be on the beach in Connecticut right now. And I'm in Florida and it's hot and sweaty and there's a lot of stuff happening in Florida. And I'm really happy to be here. But it's just funny because I really thought I was going to be somewhere else today. But the instant that things happened, and I knew the instant my heart said, be to Florida now. In fact, be there yesterday. Like, it was just like, drop everything and go with nothing on it. And then I didn't even know, like my journey to Florida was not even what I thought it was going to be. And then when I got here, like just being with family during the time that we're being in right now, like there's so much happening, but to know that that's what is, to know that that's always been what is. And now the best I can describe this is we all know, whether you celebrate Christmas or another holiday where you get to open a present, your birthday, anything. Like we know the feeling of seeing the presents under the tree or on the mantle, wrapped up, like it's our present. We're like, oh, it's my present. And we have no idea what's in the present. Like our only job is to go open it. And we open it, and sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, the best present ever. Sometimes we're like, oh, thank you, that was very kind. You know, like, but no matter what, like we have no say, really. I mean, we can ask for a present, but we really have no say what's inside the box. And that's all we're doing. And every moment in life, we're opening the gift of the present moment. Mm-hmm. And what's in that box has been in that box, sitting on the mantle. Like, we can't like talk our way out of changing what's in the box. We just open the box and all right, that's what is. But that's how we can, if we can live life like that and be totally non-judgmental with our feelings about what's in the box at the time and just live it, like it changes everything. It changes everything for all of us. So
Yeah, that's
sorry, I think
so
I just
beautifully put.
riffed on that a little bit.
Perfect. Let's go to Katrin. Over to you, my dear.
Hey, thank you so much. This is such a lovely conversation. And yeah, it's funny, that whole Cariwampuling thing, because like, yeah, I have a little sailboat that I bought like 12 years ago in Mexico. And I, had this big plan. I was going to go on this huge adventure across the Pacific. And, long story short, I'm still twiddling around in that same little bay in Mexico. And this year, I mean, because of the COVID and everything, I haven't even seen my boat for almost a year. So it's just kind of like, the unadventurous adventure, or kind of cattywampling around in this, getting stuck in this, totally unplanned thing. And part of that is, it's, I've definitely had like an ongoing, judgment about it too. Like, oh my God, like I should have been doing this, I should have been doing that to be more adventurous, and all these, but now, yeah, because of all this gang and this conversation, I'm just totally chill, and just whatever happens, it happens. Yeah. But actually, as far as like this conversation about creativity and cattywampling, I just, a couple of days ago, I got thrown into kind of a creative deadline with something which is, totally just rebuilding my website, my professional quote unquote identity, which has been in this sort of butterfly stage of goo where the old identity melts. And I've sort of trusted that melting and just been like lying low and just hanging out in there, and just really getting into this conversation, and now signing on to the, coaching mastery thing this year. All the 3 sessions for spring, which I hopefully they'll be alive on. But, the friend of mine who just proposed this collaboration thing, she's like, oh, your website. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I haven't touched it in 3 years. It's so random. It's so not me anymore. It's like, yeah, I know, you're so much more awesome, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, shit. And she said, from a branding point of view, oh, it should be clean and clear so that people understand who you are. Holy shit, like, understand who I am? Like, I don't understand who I am. I'm like formless, taking new form every moment, And so coming from like this New York kind of almost like, fashion-y, very imagey kind of branding world speak, which she's well versed in, and which has its own, legitimacy, and of course, like, it works in certain ways. And I was just kind of like, oh, interesting challenge. So, and I'm finding myself kind of back and forth over, this is a very short deadline that I have to kind of just throw something together in the next 2 weeks. So I'm finding myself kind of stuck between this, oh, this is kind of a fun creative challenge. I love when the universe throws me a total curveball, and it's kind of cool, little kick in ass, to like, holy shit, like, who am I? How do I define myself? Find like the 1 or 2 or 3 images that are like so awesome, that'll be like the brand, or
Yeah.
So it's like a funny creative, like overthinking, and then like, dropping back into this cool, like, yay, creative exploration space. And of course, like, websites, they're not carved in stone, thankfully. Like, I can redo it every day, every minute. Like, it would be kind of cool if there was such a formula. It would be like a random identity generator. Like, every new time someone clicks on it, it'll be like a different, the website itself would regenerate itself in a different way. It would be pretty cool.
Exactly.
So yeah, any words of like, advice or whatever to clear the cobwebs a little more? Like, I feel like there's sort of cobwebs, and then there's clearings, and then there's cobwebs, and there's.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like what you described. I think probably everyone on the call and listening, or anyone, could relate. I mean, that's why when Nina read my bio, I probably haven't touched the bio in a year, and I heard it, and I'm like, oh, I should probably go change it. Like, I wish our websites were like the tail of a lizard, like where it can fall off, it'll just grow a new tail. But I think it's almost like what you're describing, like, bravo, like, good for you to see that. Because I think if there's anybody that can make a website or anything else, and like, you look back at it at a later moment and you're like, yep, that's it. Like, there's something that's not moving, like we're speaking of creativity, like, as in we're creating, but like, we are creativity, like, we are ever changing and evolving, like, so of course what you say about yourself now is going to be different than some other time down the road. But it's like, yeah, our websites aren't the tail of a lizard. Like, if anyone could figure that one out, like, they would make a lot of money. Like your website just morphs as you morph without having to work on it. But it's almost like it's a cool experience to see that and to know like I have to explore and see what feels right now. But knowing that you might go back next month and change it, or it might be fine for a year, but there'll be a point where you'll read that and be like, no. And then when you do that, it's almost like, yay, congratulations. Like congratulations that you're different, that you've seen, that your creativity has shifted not only what you're putting out in the world, but who you see yourself as.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's cool. It's just like, I feel like just having a sense of humor about the whole process is pretty key.
Yeah. Like, what do you hear in all that, like, for yourself?
Well, yeah, like the idea of like, that the we are the creativity, and that it is an ongoing process. And certainly like, this short deadline of 2 weeks, like my expectations are pretty low as far as any kind of even style and quality, just to throw something up there that's just more current, more reflective of who I am. As far as like design work, or even like, make things pretty, or make things like, I love art, I love, my sister's a graphic designer, and I'm just kind of a dabbler in arts and designs, but just for fun. But I love like colors and things. So I know I'll be just like, okay, if I treat it just as a kind of a sandbox of colors and things that I can just change and keep changing. And maybe it will be like this thing that just changes every month randomly, every whatever I feel like, So that's kind of like loosens the overthinking part about like, oh, you've got to create your brand identity. Like, oh, write down who you are, what your, values or whatever the hell it's like.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you're in a good place. But yeah, isn't that cool how, but we're all guilty of it, but like someone's suggested you make a website and they're like, do this. Like you must like fill in these boxes. And it's like, yeah. Like maybe it is good to fill in those boxes, and maybe it's good to just see what pops up,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's likely going to be a conglomeration of all that, but yeah, if somebody had me go and redo my website like that right now, I'd be like, oh, I don't know, But yeah, very beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, there's like a brilliant startup idea, certainly. And if someone could come up with a website where just plug in 3 little things and be like, okay, this is like the best expression of you right now in a website form. Boom.
Yeah. There you go.
Thanks so much. That was a lovely question. Let's go to Mika, and then we'll swing around to Gary again.
Hi, Mika.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Partly I just wanted to say hi, but I also wanted to share how a few years back, and it was actually on Facebook where I saw a post, that gave the definition of Kadiwampu. And I thought, wow, that's it, because that's me. Now I get that's exactly what my path is. Because people would ask me so often, or not, so often, but on occasion you get in conversations about your life and, well, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Or what do you want to have happen, at the end of the year? And I was always just befuddled, like, I don't know. I mean, I do good to know what I'm going to have fixed for dinner tonight, or, like what this day is. And I've never, ever, ever, been a person that did those goals and plans, and I just did. I just lived, but somehow I felt like my life just had purpose organically. Yeah. Like by nature, not some big, huge purpose necessarily, but that I just it just had its own path, and I was just kind of walking along it, but it seemed like there was some kind of organic direction that it was going. I just had no idea what it was. Yeah. So anyway, when I came across that word, it just, it settled in like, yeah, see, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and then your trip to Texas, and also I will say that as an artist, I live that way too. Like, if I can't go in and think like, what do I want this to be? That's way too stressful. It's just like, it's a process. Let me just jump in the process and see what happens. And that's the only way I can create. Other than that, it feels like work and craft and then it's no fun. And if it's no fun, who wants to do it? Like it's, I could just go do anything then, but in terms of like relocation, like I did that, like I had this great job. I was making good money. I was running a gallery in New York and doing my own thing. And I did freelance work and I was doing acting and all kinds of stuff. But I reached this point where I was like, I need a change in my life. Like I'm ready for something totally different. And I came out here to California on a visit. A friend of mine was trying to nudge me to come out and do some stuff with her out in nature. And I was like, I don't know. I've never even been to that part of California. I'd have to go see it, And so I came out here on a trip like for a week, and I literally called back on my job and said, hey, I love you guys, but I'm giving you my notice. And I packed up everything and I moved out to where I like it out in the woods by myself, where all I had was a wood burning stove from Soho to like this like wood burning stove in the woods. And I had this romantic idea of how it was going to be, but it didn't quite turn out that way. And so there were whole lots of challenges, financial and, the thing not working out with my friend. And now I didn't know anybody and I was out here in the woods and how was I going to make it work? But it's 7 years and I'm still here. And like I'm finding my way and creating new things in my life, like the coaching and doing other things. So it's like, yeah, I don't know why that was just what got me out here, but that wasn't really the purpose. That was just sort of the path. So anyway, I just was really happy to be on this conversation because it felt really true to the way I live.
Yeah, well, beautiful. And that's cool that you had that experience, because my bet is pretty much anybody, when they really get what we're talking about, can relate and be like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't mean you have to move, but like me and you, we physically moved,
Yeah.
but I just think the little kid in all of us, like that little kid relates to living like this, because I really think, like, I know it's like, and you can explore this for yourself. Like, I'm not saying this is all it, but in my heart, I know this is how we were meant to live.
Yeah.
Like that's it. In fact, that's why I'm saying is if you go back to when we were all kids, like if we were all sitting here as 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, we would be like, yeah, all of us, you could take anybody in the world and they could relate to this. And then life has like molded us into something else. But inside, you could share this in a special way with anyone. And I think they can all be like, yes, like it's just who we are. Like, yeah, that's it. That's how it feels like this is how we were meant to live. Yeah. So thank you, Mika.
Yay. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, let's go back to Gary.
Going back to Gary.
Hi, I know we only have a
Gary.
second, so I'm just gonna, when you were talking about resisting what is a little while ago, I've been doing a bunch of writing about separating pain from suffering that's intended to help people who, like me, have been in constant pain for a long time. And what I wrote yesterday lines up exactly with what you were saying, and it's this. Suffering is essentially you having an argument with your pain. It's you experiencing pain and telling yourself that you shouldn't be. So I'm sorry we don't have more time to play with that, because it's I'm fascinated by that right now, because I'm doing so much. I'm generating so much stuff about it, So
yeah, no, that's beautiful. There's so many people that want to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a big, to me, that comes up so often about pain and health and all that.
Yeah.
And I think everyone who has a body, which is everyone, can relate in some way to having a struggle with pain or health of some sort. So like, wow, what a worthwhile topic to explore and share.
And the judgment you were talking about earlier, that's always involved in suffering. Without judgment, there's really not suffering.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that's the what is thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we can just be like, oh, this is what's happening, or this is how it is, or this is where I'm at, or you name it. Like the suffering melts.
Yeah.
Like it goes back to the, like judgment and suffering kind of, or somehow touch each other, but it goes back to being able to feel any emotion, but not suffer through those emotions. Just be with it, be present. So any emotion, any situation, anything, what if we could just be in that without the judgment and suffering? Like, man, ow, I can hurt, I can grieve, I can be angry. But what if I wasn't upset with myself or something else, or the pain itself for the fact of that?
Yeah.
What if it was just like, oh, this is what's coming up right now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't wait to read it, Gary.
Yeah. I'll send
If
you
you want to
something.
share.
If you'd like to see it, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That's great. I'd love to have you read it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Kristy, we're at the top of the hour. I would love to invite you to share any last thoughts that you have, as well as letting us know where people can find you.
Sure.
Maybe not physically, but
Yeah.
on the World Wide Web.
It's hard to keep up if you're trying to physically find me. It's like where somebody yesterday said, it's like, where's Waldo, or where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? That's my life. But yeah, so thoughts. You know, for all us cottywomplers, like, it's simplicity. That's our beacon. Like I shared this with it was the first time I thought of this metaphor, but just this past week I shared with someone about a lighthouse. Like a lighthouse is a beacon. And when we're living like this, when we're living in this freedom, the space of what is, like the space of experiencing whatever happens and comes up with the surrender, and the simplicity is our beacon. Like the more we're traveling and exploring and being and getting more and more in touch with simplicity, like that's our beacon. That's how we know. And it's hard to explain because it's not intellectual. You can't be like, okay, simple, let's take a right. You know, it's not like that. It's just something else. And simplicity is the easiest word I can come up with, but it's that's our beacon. So when something is difficult or appears difficult, or like Gary was saying, there's suffering, like that doesn't feel simple. It doesn't seem simple. And so it's like, well, then there's nothing to do, but you're like, oh, I'm lost here. But there's nothing to do, but just realize that and be open. Like almost when I'm in that place of difficultness, when I realize it, I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to see here? Like, what's life gonna show me? You know, and that's my big thing, is life is our coach and our guide. Like, it's great to have explorers to explore with, but we can see this through life, through our living. And it's simplicity. That's it. And that's as simple as it gets. So I hope that was a good ending. And where to find me is, you know, I'm on Facebook. You can take a screenshot of my name. There's not many of us. So you can find me on Facebook, but send me a note, because I get a lot of Facebook requests and I don't accept all of them. But everyone listening, just send me a note and say, hey, I saw you on Nina's show, and I'll accept you. But yeah, you can follow my journeys on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Cottywomple now. And my website is YouRevolution, YOUREVOLUTION. And that's the best ways to find me.
And are you doing another Cottywomple group soon?
Yes, actually, the next group starts August 13th, Thursdays at 8 Pacific. It's cool, I can remember that. But yeah, it's a small group. I cap it. It's usually around 12. I cap it. It will never be more than 14. And there's no facilitator, by the way, is the rumor. It's just exploration. But it's really a fun experience if you're interested. Sounds
great. Well, big hugs and love to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you, Nina. This is really a cool thing you've got going on.
Well, thank you. It's made cool by people like you.
Yes, and thanks everyone. This was really fun.
That's right. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.
Yes. Bye.